taking a photo and getting rid of all the little blemishes and irregularities and brightening and darkening so that your photo looks like a more perfect version is something that most Photoshoppers learn how to do. There are several ways to do this. I'm just going to show you the really basic way and we'll go from there. So anytime we're retouching a photo, it's a good idea to duplicate the original layer so that you can always go back to seeing the progress that you've made from the original. So on my duplicate, I'm going to name that Retouch, and then grab your spot healing brush tool and go around the face, clicking on the little blemishes, and they should disappear. Now if you take this tool and go over a line, it will fudge it, so stay away from edges and lines and watch out for irregularities that you produce. If you hit something and it looks weird, just do an undo and do again. So you can zoom in at any time for a closer look by hitting Command plus and then holding your space bar to pan around. For typical photos, I am really against removing characteristics. If there are zits or some redness that would be gone the next week, I'm fine with removing those, but normally if I were doing portraits of, say, family members, for example, I wouldn't want to remove a mole or freckles because those are part of who that person is. What I would usually do in that scenario is take away any of the things I just mentioned, like acne that could be gone in a few weeks, but I won't remove a scar. I might soften it. Softening is a good way to look at how you do retouching, is to soften features, but I try not to alter who the person is. Okay, so now we've got a lot of those little blemishes zapped. You can turn that top layer off and on to see your progress. And the next thing we want to do is take care of some of this dark color beneath her eyes. This is almost a do it for any photo you work on, is grab your patch tool and circle some of that area. Try to avoid the eyelashes, and then you're just going to drag that over to an equivalent area on the other side of the face that has that bright fine skin and let go. Now when we deselect, Command D, we can turn that off and on and see what effect that had, and that looks pretty good. I'm zooming in and then grabbing my spot heal brush to see if I can smooth some of this out just a tiny bit. Now if you hit the point where those healing tools aren't actually working the way you want them to, just grab your clone tool and do it the good old-fashioned way. So I'm going to grab my patch tool for this side as well. Just grab this little bit of area. I'm holding shift to add a little bit more, and I'm just going to drag this down just a little bit because that'll soften that look. Once you've got all of the blemishes really cleared off the way you want them to be, it's a good idea to soften just a tiny bit. Now there's a bunch of ways you could do that too, but the tool I'm going to show you is the blur tool. It looks like a little teardrop. And if you click on that and then set the strength down to about 50%, you can, oh, where'd it go? You can come in and just very, very faintly smooth and soften some of those larger pores on the girl's face. You do again want to stay away from edges. We don't want the edges to become a messy edge. We want to keep the detail of the edges. Now, one thing you don't want to do is go for the old plastic skin look, and that's where you would go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and just blur the heck out of something and make it look really plasticky. We're avoiding that. That is a out of mode look. When people first started doing this stuff in Photoshop, that was pretty common. But it's more popular now to keep skin texture but get rid of the blemishes and discolorations. In fact, I've put a layer or a link on my site to a couple of other video tutorials of a technique called frequency separations that's very commonly used now in professional settings, and it's really fascinating. But this is more the basic one. So I still have one more spot on her nose here that I think I kind of want to get rid of. Or soften. There we go. Alrighty. Once you've got all of the skin retouching done that you want to do, create a new layer and name this one Dodge Burn. And go to the Edit menu, choose Fill, and set it to 50% gray, opacity at 100, and click OK. Then in your Layers panel, there's a drop down next to opacity. Click on that and set the blend mode to soft light. Now you can grab your Dodge Burn tool, which looks like the magnifying glass, but it's called the Dodge tool, and reduce the exposure. Make sure Protect Tones is on, and now you can come in here, and when you click, it should brighten her face. I have mine set to mid-tones and my exposure set to about 50%. And what we do here is come in and brighten areas that should be a little bit lighter, like underneath the eye. And girls, think of anywhere that you take your makeup and try and lighten up to make some contrast. Guys, if you want to get good at doing this of Photoshop restoration, go watch some makeup tutorials on YouTube. Once you have kind of the lighter areas done, you can hold down Option, which will make it go dark, and you can do the darker areas. So when we're doing dark areas, you want to think of areas to emphasize. So down underneath the cheekbones or underneath the eyebrows. So we're just providing some more contouring, and again in makeup that's an actual thing. Let's maybe lighten up that little bit under her nose. It's sort of dark and purple. Also a spot to lighten is just inside the corner of the eye. If it feels like it's coming on too strong or you're getting really abrupt contrast, you can lower the exposure even a little bit more. What's nice about where this is at is it's not actually doing this to a layer. It's doing this on a gray layer, just adding white and black. So really, you could actually paint white and black on here. Now I've done something here. I really don't like how she's got a corner almost there on her face, so I've messed around with it, tried to smooth it out. Now I'd like to take this into quite a dramatic spot, so I'm cranking up my exposure and I'm going to come around the edges of her face to make it seem thinner and really darken in there. I'm going to try and avoid her eye because we'll get to those in a minute, but put some underneath her bangs and there at the top of her eye. I'm going to lighten, so I'm not holding Option, I'm going to lighten this area down to around her chin. Mostly it just looks a little too pouty. So I'm just zooming in and out, and if I do something I don't like, I'm hitting Command Z to undo it. Anytime you want to add more shape or definition, put a highlight on something by brightening where the light would first hit it, and then darkening where it turns away from the light. And that will add more of a shape to it. So I'm darkening around kind of the outside of this girl's lips, and then lightening where the highlight already is. Now that we've done that, zoom in on the eyes. The eyes are pretty important. Again, I have my dodge tool. I'm on midtones and I'm going to lighten. In fact, let's change this to highlights and see what happens. There, that made more of an effect. I'm going to set my exposure lower and do just a little bit of lightening. You don't want to get alien eyes, so back out and look at it a little bit. Alien eyes is when you've really over brightened something, like this area right here is over brightened. So I'm hitting Command Option Z to really step back, or you can go to your history panel and go back a ways. Let's try that again. And then I am going to also lighten just here inside her eye, as if there was light coming down and reflecting off the bottom of her eye. And that will just add a little bit more dynamic look to this already quite interesting pink-haired girl. And again, if you go too far, you can back up and take a look, and if you've added too much, go back in your history and redo whatever it is that you wanted to redo.